Yo, what up? I'm BK Love. We're in the Senvion, and we're going to be doing an artist spotlight on SHBASS.
What's up?
What up?
Hey, man. Thank you for having me here.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we want to dive a little bit into the background of who you are as an artist, and, yeah, talk a little bit about the music that you're producing.
Cool.
So, I don't know. Let's see. To get started, how long have you been producing music?
That's a good question. So I've been producing music for, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, right? Because music has been a large part of my life since I was maybe like 3 or 4 years old. There was actually this wedding that I went to with my parents. It was a cousin, or I think like a second cousin. That family things like that always get confusing, but essentially, there was a band playing, and they were taking a break in between their sets for this wedding. And I ran up when I was like 5 or 6, and started playing on the drums. So it's always been something that I was kind of drawn towards. As far as writing music as I am right now with electronic music and using Ableton, it's been about 3 or 4 years on that.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've been involved in music like basically your whole life, and then for the last like 3 or 4 years you've been, it sounds like, taking it pretty seriously and diving into all this digital software and production.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually in band in high school too, and throughout middle school and elementary school. Music's always been a big part of my life, and there was some sort of like awakening moment in my mid-20s where I kind of realized music is really my passion, and if there's anything that I want to leave the world with, it's my music. So
that's pretty beautiful. I don't think I've really heard it put that way before. Like leave the world with like your legacy, if you will, or a gift, a gift to the world that you spend your time on this planet creating. That's pretty cool. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what kind of music you're inspired to create. This bass music, dubstep kind of sound that we've been hearing coming from you. So what was that, like that 4 or 5 year mark when you started getting more into that style of music, or?
So the 4 or 5 year mark is around when I started learning how to write that kind of music. But I actually was introduced to artists like Banga, Scream, Bass Nectar, and Datsyk before they did some terrible things and were kind of taken out of our culture at that point. That was around when I was in high school, so that was about 10 years ago when I first found that kind of sound. Mm-hmm. And then a few years after I graduated, I was going to local music festivals in Missoula, and I saw some people DJing, and I was just like in awe. It was like, how are you making all these crazy sounds with all these buttons and sliders? How does that work? So I started DJing, and I just DJ'd for a while, and then there was just this point where I decided that I wanted to DJ my own music, and instead of playing other people's music. No, then that's not like a critique to other DJs who don't write their own music and produce, because I think that's a really important part of the community and the EDM scene, like internationally. If you don't have the DJs playing out your music, then there's just a lot less people listening to your music in general. So
for sure, well, I do think that the DJ producer combo, to me as a DJ, this is kind of like the holy grail almost, if you will. Like, I'm not a producer, and I feel like I always have been putting producer / DJs, especially the people that produce great music and also can DJ it well, because that's not everybody in these categories. I've always felt like that's kind of like the holy grail. Like that's kind of on a pedestal for me personally. And I think that it's like, you know, been really cool to watch you come up in that regard through this process over the years. Let's see. So you started out DJing this type of music before you started producing it.
Yeah.
And what inspires you to dive in? Like, it's a pretty intense process.
I think that part of the reason why I decided to dive in to the producing side was I had a similar feeling about it being holy grail.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, that was really a huge goal of mine. And starting out, I realized that it was a lot harder than it looks from the outside. Because when you see people on social media talking about releasing new music or working on music, sometimes it seems like it's overnight. Like people blow up and it's like, well, actually they've been working on this for 10, 15 years and now the music sounds good. Luckily, it hasn't taken 10 or 15 years for me to get to the point where I feel comfortable releasing stuff on like Spotify. But it has been a while. It's been longer than I thought it would take. And part of that was like the struggle to just show up for myself and sit there and go through the hours and hours of like YouTube videos and doing like 5 minutes of work and then realizing I have another question, looking on forums on the internet. Such a long process. It's really it's like the curve. If you look at it on a graph, the learning curve is pretty harsh starting out. So it's tough, but it's definitely nice to be where I'm at now. There's definitely more to do though.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely appreciate that statement. I feel like there's two different types of sessions sometimes for artists. Like one where it's like homework, like the studying side of it. So watching YouTube videos, how the fuck do I do this or that? And then that fun part of actually getting to create seamlessly.
Yeah, and that never ends.
Yeah.
There, like, no matter how much you learn, there's always more to learn in the audio world. Even if you're not producing, you know, if you're on like the promoter side and you're throwing shows, there's always something that you can improve. I mean, I think that just kind of applies to life in general. That's something of a philosophy of mine is this like kind of growth mindset. There's an artist, there's an author. Her name's Carol Dweck. Dweck? I think it's Dweck. It's a funny last name. But she's an MD and she wrote a book on growth mindset. And that's just generally the idea is that you don't stop growing. You can continue to improve yourself. Your IQ isn't stagnant. Those sorts of things.
Especially with such a technologically driven art form, you know, it's like, I feel like painting, if you will, like, you know, a lot of the techniques that were discovered ages ago and utilized, and you're not seeing a lot of new technological growth. But the music industry, I feel like it's constantly evolving, and there's constantly new updates to software and new gear coming out, and you know, new YouTube videos showing us different techniques.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like just even like 10 or 20 years ago, the music industry was completely different. And then now I guess like the biggest change recently has been probably COVID, you know, everyone coming back. Like we didn't even know when we would have live music, and thankfully things are kind of starting to even out. Although I've heard from a lot of promoter friends that headliners are a lot more expensive than they used to be. And I don't know if that's because they're making up for lost time or it's just more expensive for flights now. I'm not sure why that's the case, but
crazy. How did the pandemic affect you as an artist?
That's a really great question. So the way that the pandemic affected me as an artist essentially was it gave me a lot of time to reflect, not just as an artist, but just like a person in the world. It gave me a moment to kind of look back and have time to see what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong. And that's actually essentially around the time when I moved out of Montana to Colorado. I had been planning on being in the Denver area for a long time. It was something that I had been talking about for years and years. And the pandemic, my job switched to at home. So I had a lot of time where instead of talking to coworkers, I was just, in my home office. So that in combination with it just, I was born and raised in Missoula. So I think I had hit the point where I needed to leave, and COVID and the pandemic at large just kind of gave me that grace period to move.
Yeah, I feel like the pandemic for a lot of artists created some sort of reset button reflection situation that I think for a bunch of people, it created a lot of growth. It kind of, I don't know, churned the stagnation, if you will, a little bit. I feel like we should talk a little bit about, how do I say it? I see you on flyers all the time. You get booked a lot in Montana.
Yeah.
I feel like you're one of the DJs that's been pretty consistently booked in Montana. And I mean, to me personally, you've earned that. You're a very talented artist, and you're very driven. And I feel like ever since I met you, you've been just working on your art consistently. So yeah, maybe a little bit about what that looks like. There's a lot of up and coming artists in the community right now that they don't really understand any of this. Like what that, how do you get on that flyer? How do you get on that music festival?
Yeah, for sure. I think, as far as people wanting to be on those flyers, and just being on a bill in general, playing more shows, my biggest tip or advice is just keep creating, because if your art's out there and you have something to show to someone who might book you, that's the most important thing. Because I've found that a lot of DJs will have they'll have mixes, but they won't have anything in particular about the mix that's going on. And I think in this day and age with social media and content creators and influencers and all that jazz, you've got to have more going on with your music than just the mix by itself.
Like a bit of depth.
A bit of depth, and meaning. There's got to be meaning behind your music. I actually, I just recently befriended someone in the Denver community who's doing these after-hour parties. And I had a conversation with him recently about how essentially a lot of dubstep music now really has a meaning. It's got this hard, heavy vibe to it, but why? Why is it hard and heavy? Because those are human emotions that should be portrayed through art. But a lot of times you'll find whole DJ sets on SoundCloud or whatever that just don't have the depth, like you said.
Yeah, I like that you're just talking about the vibe that comes out of this type of music, dubstep and bass music. It's it can be a bit rough, a bit gritty, and I feel like on the dance floor it reminds me a little bit of a heavier hip hop show from back in the day, like a little bit rough and gangster almost.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about that vibe a little bit and what that means to you?
Yeah, so for me personally, that vibe comes from metal and progressive rock and the gritty heaviness of those genres. When I was in high school and I was listening to these classic dubstep artists, I had found them through other hard genres like screamo. That was a big thing. I'm gonna age myself in this, but Bring Me the Horizon. I'm actually wearing a Whitechapel t-shirt. I don't know if the cameras can see. I guess they can probably see that. Yeah, Whitechapel. And this is from Warped Tour in 2013. It's one of the nicest shirts I've ever had. And I'm hoping that the merch that I have coming out soon will actually be of this quality where I can wash it a million times and it'll still be there. I think it will be, but so that kind of vibe. Recently I've been listening to a lot of Korn, and Korn has a lot of interesting rhythmic changes with their guitar and the drums, and that's something that I try to put into my music as well, because that's really inspiring for me. So
Yeah, I wonder if this resonates with you. As an artist, for me, like expressing myself, like I feel like there's certain things that I just have to express. It's almost like not a choice,
yeah,
if you will. And like the type of vibe that I'll express through my DJing or through my painting, it's like something that just resonates, like, you know, deep within me. And then the music, you know, that I've been hearing you put out, the DJ sets, like it can have these, you know, moments that are like, it can go from like chill to aggressive, like back to kind of chill vibes. Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering a bit of the background of that for you and what that does for you, like putting that out there.
sure. I think part of the reason why my music can sometimes feel like it's going back and forth is I often feel like there's a duality that I deal with where I really love to be chill and just hang out, you know, drink some coffee and read a book, go on a nice hike, total silence. I like silence, which feels ironic as a musician, especially with this music that's like best played loud.
Sure, sure.
But it's that's one side of it, and then the other side is this like I sometimes I have moments of like manic energy that I'm just like everything all at once, you know, all the time, or whatever that movie's called.
They just won 1 million like awards. That movie was
It's great.
amazing.
It's probably one of my favorite movies.
Same.
So trying to combine those energies that I personally resonate with into a set is something I do often. And what I like to do in the future, as far as like upcoming events, is I'd like to split those up a little bit so that I can have these moments with folks where I don't go as heavy or I don't go as light. So like it's some sort of like down tempo set,
Sure.
which I mean that genre seems like it's the most open-ended. I mean, it's like basically calling something ambient, which means what? That
It's just there.
it's not
sound.
yeah, it's just sound, but like it could have a rhythm, it could not have a rhythm, it could have lots of chord progressions, it could have no chord progressions. Ambient's such a strange genre. But yeah, so there's definitely a lot of contrast there. And it's been tricky to figure out how to combine all of those feelings and meaning into one brand, because you see a lot of artists do something where they split it up, so they have one brand for their like minimal techno, and then
Totally.
they've got their other brand for their like bass house.
Totally.
But I like combining that. So
Yeah, I mean, look, Picasso, right? Cubist, sculptor, did a lot of different stuff. He didn't create a different name for each one of his styles and projects. And yeah, I've been seeing a lot of DJs and music producers do that, but I'm right there with you. I don't see how that benefits. I see how it can be confusing to the audience who like tunes in to your ambient style and falls in love with that. Let's say if you were doing ambient music,
sure.
And then like all of a sudden you drop like an aggressive dubstep track, and they're like, "Wait a minute, what the fuck's going on?"
Where
like,
did that come from?
But I think that I think that if artists just explain it a little bit, like you're saying, like this depth, then maybe that like helps with that kind of continuity or helps alleviate any confusion. But I don't understand why separate it other than that reason. Feels like you're also dividing your ability to advertise what you're doing, you know. So
yeah.
I think that's cool that you're doing that kind of approach of showing how diverse you are as an artist. Which we haven't even talked about your saxophone playing at all. Speaking of how diverse you are as an artist, what was it? I guess it was summer of 2022 where we did that project together where you busted out the saxophone and we did this live set together with Simo and Mumblebee at Forest Creatures, and the saxophone is like this whole other side of you that people absolutely love. I feel like they lose their minds to it.
So that's a tricky one because I've been playing sax longer than I've been producing music, longer than I've been DJing. You know, that goes back to my roots of like being a band geek and marching band and all that stuff. And I want to integrate it into what I'm doing now, but the tricky thing is that whenever I'm playing saxophone, depending on the live setting, whether I'm mixing my own audio or someone else is mixing it, I've ran into a lot of issues where the sax is too loud, it's not loud enough, I can't hear it well, so it's out of tune, and I don't know it's out of tune because what I'm hearing isn't what they're hearing.
I think this is where, as soon as you integrate live performance, like having a sound engineer present, just makes a lot of sense. It's really difficult to be a full one-man show without support. As a DJ, I feel like it's so much easier. As long as you're not overdriving something track-wise.
Yeah, and there's ways to do it with Ableton where you can track yourself. But I really like the plug-in and play aspect of CDJs, especially because there's so much. I think you called it homework earlier, but it's there's so much work that goes into writing, mixing, and mastering a track before you even plug it into a CDJ, that by the time I'm playing it, I just want to hit play and let people hear the track for what it is. So to integrate saxophone into it, it's not something that I'm opposed to, and it's definitely something I want to do in the future. The tricky thing is how do I want to do that, and how much work do I want to be doing on the stage versus having someone else, maybe mix it. And for a lot of shows that I play, it's like a friend throwing an event with their own speakers. They're not the most technically advanced sound person. It's generally just a mixer and some speakers, which is great. It's a fun party, but it's not a great situation or environment for live instruments.
For sure.
So that's been kind of a battle that I've been trying to win.
Yeah. Have you been putting your sax in some of your recorded tracks?
I have, yeah. There's actually, I haven't released it yet, but there's this track that I wrote that's in, I believe it is in 7/8 time signature, and there's some recorded sax in that song. There's some songs that are on SoundCloud from previous aliases too that I've got some recorded saxophone there. So that's one option is, I might not play saxophone live, but it's in the tracks. But that's totally not as cool,
Yeah, it's I feel like for party goers, dancers, people there to just absorb it all, there is some element that the electronic music world, I feel like, has been criticized over the years of lacking, and it is that live element. People are like, what is this DJ stuff? It's I'm used to seeing bands. What do you guys even do up there? Blah, blah, blah. And I think, when we see stuff like your sax, it's it's more tangible for the people that don't understand electronic music as well. It makes a little bit more sense to them, and I feel like they respect it more or something.
Yeah, there's definitely something to say about just the appeal of live instruments in that kind of setting. And it doesn't matter what the instrument is. I've seen Lecture, Hannibal, who's another artist in the Montana, Missoula scene that's played a lot of shows, been on a lot of flyers, and he's done a couple shows where he brings a recorder or a slide flute,
cool.
And it doesn't matter what it is. It's just a little bit more fun or higher energy when you bring that out. It was a previous alias of mine. I was just going under my own name at the time, mainly because I was still learning Ableton and I wasn't ready to fully dive into one musical idea, so I was just I'll just go by my name. But I played a show with him and a few other artists, Nintendo and Mr. Moo, and everyone had live instruments or doing something live, we brought in the drummer last towards the end because that was the peak energy. I remember having a conversation with them about that because out of all of those instruments, the drums are definitely the backbone of EDM. So when you have live drums, it's the backbone is right in front of you. And yeah, for some reason that's it's almost a primal need to have live drums.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of it is just that, the live aspect, or I guess the live creation with instruments in a live performance is just more, it's been more accepted. It's been around for, forever, where even though the electronic music art forms and DJing, it's like, we're well over 30 years of it going pretty consistent. I think there's just still so many people that just don't understand it. It's still like falling into this old mindset of what do these guys even do anyway? Yeah. And maybe we should alleviate that a little bit for those people if they're listening. Like what are you doing when you're DJing? Like what's going on back there?
Yeah, so most of the time I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do next, because the moment that I've played a song and I've hit play, now I'm deciding. Now I'm looking at the crowd, maybe seeing if people are dancing, not dancing, what's the vibe, and track selection. Because a big thing about DJing is like what tracks you play and when you play it and how you play it, and going back to like the deeper meaning and depth of things, it's like why are you playing that song too? So for me, oftentimes I'll plan some of the songs ahead of time. There's some transitions that I'll just be really excited to show people, so I'll probably play it no matter what. And part of that comes back to like, well, I wrote this song myself, so I'm going to play it at some point, even if it might not match the vibe all the way.
How has that been received when you do that?
So for the most part, I haven't heard anything bad. I've never had someone like walk up to me and say, "Did you write this? Because this doesn't work."
Sounds off.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been lucky enough to play some tunes that the New Year's show that we played, or I guess you with the Starlight Reunion crew organized that. That was a party, man. That was really fun.
Yeah, you crushed it.
Thanks, man.
That was really fun.
Yeah. So during that set, kind of in the middle, at that point I had just released a song. It's a Christmas song. That's literally what it's called, because I couldn't think of anything else. I just called it a Christmas song. And essentially halfway through it, it's got one drop that's like 90 BPM or something like that, and then it switches to 140, which is like the typical dubstep BPM. So I wanted to use that song as a transition to go from this like dancey, hip hop type rhythm set into a more dubstep and a heavier set midway through, and people loved it. I saw people dancing throughout the whole time I played that song, which was actually a kind of a highlight of like where I'm going with this project. It's kind of moments like that push me to keep going when I can play a song and see that people aren't just like totally like I don't just kill the dance floor,
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's so important.
I gotta imagine that's like one of the highest rewards, as like a music producer, having the reception of your track when you're DJing it.
Yeah, it feels good for sure. I mean, at the very least, it's like a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
So, outside of the deeper meaning of leaving something behind for folks, and the meaning behind the brand, and like just the importance of music in our community in general, it's nice to hit play on something that I made and get some smiles and booty shaking.
Yeah, definitely. One thing just jumped out to me, and like talking about being an artist and how you're received as an artist. Let's talk a little bit about, how do I say it best? Almost like there's a lot of conversation right now in the art world on supporting the arts and how people can support the arts. And there's all this controversy of, oh, that's not supporting the arts and this is, and blah, blah, blah. Can you maybe put out, like, in this interview, like a little advice on, how to be supportive in maybe ways that aren't as obvious? Like, we know, don't sit there and try to haggle the door and be like, I don't want to pay $20 for this show.
Yeah.
I'd pay 10 or, but like what, besides like a cover charge, like what else can people be doing to show their support to you as an artist?
Sure. So I think there's kind of two levels to that, because there's a lot you can do without ever really like showing your support, but you can still support them. And that's just listening to the music. You know, if you see your friend, you know, out there working really hard and talking about their music, go check it out. Because the worst thing that happens is their music isn't your cup of tea and you move on. But at least, you know, you gave it a listen and you gave it a chance. And I think a lot of artists, there's just so much music out there. I don't know what the statistics are, but it's like hundreds of thousands of songs are uploaded to Spotify every day.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's a lot of options.
It's a lot of options, and it's hard to break out of that. Especially, I mean, as a DJ, there's so much music that I listen to that I don't like, and I don't buy from Beatport or on Bandcamp or whatever to throw in a DJ set. There's a lot of mediocre art out there, and I think maybe part of that is because there's a lot of folks who are in the middle of their journey, you know. But either way, it's still worth checking it out. In that way, and also just for friends. But I think as far as supporting it and showing support, one of the biggest things is, you know, not asking for like a guest pass, and merch.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things a lot of people don't know is just how much purchasing merch actually supports the artist. Like, you know, a lot of people, you know, they buy a ticket to this show and think, oh, you know, I just gave Rowan $10 or $20, but
maybe 50 cents. He bought me a icicle pop or something. But yeah, for sure. And you know, like even like 20, 30 years ago, people were making a lot more money in music sales. You'd put out a CD or vinyl or whatever, and people were buying it online or in person. And that's just not the case now. It's like sometimes people buy music, but the most often it seems like people who are buying music, as far as in the electronic music scene, they're buying it because they want to play it out. And so you've got a small niche scene of DJs who like your music and they buy your music. But outside of that, it's really about buying everything that's related to your music, which is why, like, you know, again, like with upcoming artists, you have to have more than your music, and that doesn't mean you should sell yourself out, but it does mean that you have to put a little bit more work into it to get something out of it, and, you know, hopefully have a career. That's my goal. I don't think that's a goal for every musician out there, but I think it's definitely important to have a lot of options for folks to be able to support you if they don't want to buy your music to DJ it.
Sick. Okay. How about, like, you know, besides how we can, you know, support you with merch and stuff like that, what about like just digital in general? Like, it seems like there's a lot of pressure right now with Facebook, Instagram, you know, and then all the music streaming sites. What helps you there?
So for sure, the follows, the likes, the shares. Actually, often I'll comment on posts of friends who are making music, even if I don't listen to their music, or I don't have time to listen to their music at the moment. I'll still comment and say, like, this is really great, or this is fire, just so more people see it, because I want to support them, not only as an artist, but like also as a friend.
Yeah, totally.
And I think a lot of times that can come up where it's like, I want to support my friend, but I just don't have the time to check everything out and go to their shows. You know, maybe they're like a single mother or father situation, so they don't have the time to do that. But I think that it's really important, or helpful for artists to at least do some of those minimal things, like liking a post or giving them a follow me on Instagram,
subscribe. Yeah. I mean, well, look, like as a promoter, you know, I look at those things. I don't make my decision based on just that alone. Like, oh man, this guy's got so many followers. He must be amazing. Like, I'm going to listen to the music. I'm going to try to look at that depth that we were talking about earlier before booking an artist. But I feel like a lot of people don't know just how important those things have become. And let's face it, like, I think the art world was a little bit more pure before these things. People could focus just on the art.
Yeah.
Now I feel like an artist is focusing on becoming like their own company, if you will.
Yeah. And I think part of that is because there's more people in the world and there's more artists in the world.
More competition.
More competition. And it's oversaturated, but it's like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Everyone has a creative side to them, and I think more people should be writing music and painting and drawing and all of those things. But the issue is, going back to how many songs are uploaded to Spotify, no one's seeing those songs or listening to those songs unless they have a following somewhere else. Because essentially, the way a lot of that works is like, if you build up one platform, then it kind of trickles into other platforms.
Yeah,
or at least I've been told that.
Totally. It's like you put a track on Spotify, and if anybody, Spotify's not going to just dump that into everybody's, playlists or like, automatically just pop it up for these artists that aren't like internationally renowned. So it's like you have to advertise that your track is on Spotify.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of in an amateur level for all this stuff. I'm like actively researching how all this works.
How to crack the code.
How to crack the code. But essentially part of it is that you have to pitch to Spotify and Spotify playlist curators so that you can get on like the Discover Weeklies and the release radars and all that stuff. Because apparently, just because you follow someone doesn't mean that it's going to show up in your playlists for your Spotify account. Totally. So stuff like that, there's a lot of hurdles. I mentioned the learning curve for Ableton. I feel like the learning curve for marketing yourself is like totally different genre of a school of thought, but it's about the same. I think it's the same amount of work and the same amount of know-how that's required to really do it effectively.
Yeah, seems like a lot.
Yeah.
So what do you think like holds you back as an artist?
What holds me back as an artist? I think the biggest thing is, the fact that I can write a lot of music, I can put it all out there, and then no one listens to it.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago, I thought that if it's on Spotify, you're big, you made it, yeah, you got it. But apparently that's not how it works. So I think the biggest thing is, essentially doing what I'm doing right now, which is just constantly watching YouTube videos and looking on, like Reddit subforums for marketing and just like figuring out what's good advice, what's bad advice, sifting through the grain, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, I can relate to that. It seems really overwhelming for artists today to, it's like have a major in art and a minor in running a business.
Yeah.
Like, geez.
Totally.
All for one person to hopefully achieve enough recognition that somebody will take the business side off of their plate.
And in the long run, it's definitely better to manage yourself. I've been told that from a lot of people who run their own like independent record labels. It's definitely worthwhile to manage yourself because you just keep a lot more of your royalties and stuff like that. So really a big goal of mine is just to have an agent so I don't have to like talk my promoter friends into booking me. I can just have someone else do that for me. And I'm actually in the process of building an EPK, which I should have done years ago. But
what is this?
So an EPK, it's a electronic press kit. It's
Cool.
Essentially it's generally something that you can print out, but it's also an online version with links that you can click on and go to like Instagram, Facebook, whatever. But it's just brief overview of who you are, what you're doing. It generally will have like a link to like your tech writer, hospitality writer. So it's something that you can just quickly send over to someone who's like possibly considering booking you. And I think most of the time labels build these for you, but not at that point. So so I've got a buddy making an EPK for me. Should have in like a day or two.
Nice.
So I'm really excited because I'm at the point where people are asking for EPKs, and I'm like, guess I'm not there yet, but I'll be there. So.
Well, while we're on the EPK subject, how about that slice of pizza? I got a feeling that's in there.
Yeah, totally. So the slice of pizza will be somewhere in there. I just had a friend recently make another version of my logo, and it's essentially SHBASS, but the A is a pizza slice. And I guess like the main reason why I wanted my brand to have some pizza in it is it's just my favorite food. You know?
I love that.
It's so good. And I feel like bass music and dubstep and stuff like that is like greasy, and it's like so bad it's good. Not like it's bad music, but it's like, you know, it's like bad to the bone.
Like pizza.
Yeah,
it's like delicious, but it can fucking kill you.
Yeah, dude. Totally. Because I mean, it's got that dangerous, like they use a lot of like the 7th to the 1 intervals in like a scale. They do a lot of interval melodic stuff where it sounds evil. And you don't find that in a lot of other genres other than like rock, metal, and dubstep and bass music, stuff like that. And so yeah, pizza's got an evil vibe, man, and I dig it.
I like that. I also feel like there's a sense of humor within that too. Like, you know, I dig the pizza slice.
And it goes back to the duality thing with, like, you know, sometimes my sets will feel a little bit lighter and a little bit heavier. And I think for me, what I love about music is that you can have all this contrast and it can still fit together. You know, you can't have the loud sounds without silence as a you know, at least just a way to contrast it so that you know what's louder than totally quiet. And I like to use silence in my DJ sets and writing music too.
You're like one of the only artists that I feel like has discussed silence in DJ sets that I've ever heard, and it's open my ears to silence. As weird as that might sound, but I think that I think that is important, and I'm like, you know, glad to have picked up that from you to think about the contrast in these moments that we can integrate into our sets and integrate into sounds, and I think that it's really inspiring to think about what you can do with silence, like.
Yeah, for sure. The hardcore version of that, I can't remember the composer's name, but he wrote a song and it was totally silence. And essentially everyone packed it in this auditorium. He walks to the piano bench, sits down, and he just sits there for 17 minutes. I don't think he might lift the cover off the keys. I don't even think he does that. He just sits there for like 17, 20 minutes, and then it's over and everyone claps. So, yeah.
Conceptual.
Yeah. You know, you can only do that once. I'm never going to go that far, but
I don't think that's going to land a record deal, but it but it's, I mean, it's like eye-opening, ear-opening to, you know, the conceptual art and performance art. It all seems to really tie together into, you know, who people are as an artist and what they stand for and what they're trying to do.
And it's part of like our humanity. Like no one's perfect. We all have a darker side of us. You know, Carl Jung calls it our shadow, or called it. Carl Jung's like not alive now, right? That's a past tense situation. I don't know, but yeah. Anyways, he called it a shadow, or your shadow, and essentially like that's I take that into music a lot. Like my own struggles with like my personal demons and stuff. I think that's kind of where the angsty, angry sound of SHBASS can come from. But then there's also like, you know, sometimes I wake up and it's a fucking good day. So that comes into my music too.
Hell yeah. Well, maybe we should just run through some like more off music topic questions, some weirder stuff.
Sure.
Let's see. How about I mean, Favorite food seems like low-hanging fruit, no pun intended, but I don't know that...
Well, I also like Thai food.
Is it going to be pizza, though? Like, if I ask you your favorite food, is it going to be pizza? Is it that obvious?
So, yeah, pizza's great. Pizza's obviously my favorite. I actually used to, when I was like 10 or 11, I wanted to move to New York and just eat pizza every day, and that was probably my first, like, what do you want to do when you grow up goal.
Eat pizza.
Eat pizza in New York, because New York's got the best pizza. And then I grew up and I realized that you can't eat pizza, and I don't really like New York. I mean, I like New York for like a week or two, but then after that, it's too much. The city's too big. Yeah, people they talk too fast, they move too fast. It's too much.
The hive, the big hive.
Yeah, but Thai food would probably be my equal to pizza.
What dish really?
I'm basic, man. I just pad Thai.
Pad Thai.
Yeah.
More silly questions. Favorite color?
Black.
Black. Black is like what the void of color, right?
Yeah, totally. Or
of course, you're wearing all black. I should have known.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like I like to think of black as like it could be almost all of the colors. If it was all of the colors, it'd be brown, right? But I feel like there's like isn't there a combination of colors that would create black?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think maybe that's more theoretical, that black is the void of all colors, something else.
Because white could be the void of all colors too, right?
White is supposed to be all the colors combined.
What the hell?
Yeah, I don't know.
How does that work, man? This is why I'm a musician.
We'll interview a color specialist in the next episode.
All right, yeah, I'll watch
Get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
How about some of the up-and-coming shows you have? Maybe we should plug some of those in here.
Sure. There's a bunch that I can't talk about, which is kind of an interesting thing about, I don't know how many other industries there are where, like, you get booked for a lot of things and you have to keep it a secret. And, like, oftentimes you're under contract that you can't talk about it until, like, a specific date, and you have to post about it in a specific way. So that's been interesting as an artist to like, try to talk about things that I'm excited for without giving too much away because I'm like contractually obligated to.
Sure. Well, how about the ones that they're not like?
So forest creatures for sure. That's been an annual thing for me for a long time. Working with you and everyone else at Starlight Reunion. It's just it's a fun time, and it's nice to get out in the woods because in Colorado, like, you can do that, but there's not as much like public land use as there is in Montana. So y'all are real lucky to have that still. It's awesome. There is public land in Colorado. But
yeah, I think the Forest Creatures Project just isn't, I don't think that's a popular way to go about, putting together like a festival or a big gathering. And we are really fortunate in Montana that we have so much public space and so little like hatred from the government here on sharing our art that way. Yeah. And a special combination.
So I'm playing Forest Creatures for sure. I'm actually working on, I don't know if it's like public or not, whether he's working on it, but a good buddy of mine's doing like one of the stages for that event. So I'm going to help him organize and get all of our friends on the lineup and all that stuff, which I'll actually have a Google sheet for. I'll post about it probably by the end of this month or next month, so people can sign up. So it won't like just be our friends, but
sure.
Obviously, you got to give your homies a spot. And then I'm also working on a show on 420. Cool. That's all I can say about that. And then in July, the same month as Forest Creatures, there's also a ton of other shows that I'll be playing in Montana. Last year I did kind of a mini tour in July, so I ended up just doing the same thing. So I'll have a show in Billings, a show in Bozeman, a couple shows in Bozeman, and then that one in the Missoula area, I guess. But I'm looking for more bookings too. There's definitely a couple days left on the weekends that I can fill.
Yeah, actually, we should talk a little bit about bookings. I think that different artists will accept different types of bookings. I don't know that the majority of people understand how accessible or inaccessible an artist may be when it comes to that. What does that look like?
So for me, most of the time I won't play more than one show a month. And the main reason for that is because I don't want people to get bored or hear the same set over and over again if I haven't changed my set in the past month. So, and that's actually, funny enough, there was like a post on Facebook like 7 or 8 years ago by Nick Chakota that mentioned that when I was still DJing and I wasn't writing music, and he said, essentially, if there's anything that artists can do in Missoula in particular, to get more of a following, is don't play every single weekend.
Yeah, the seduction of.
And I did that for a long time, and it ended up being really unhealthy because I ended up, you're playing the show and there's always the after party. Sometimes I play 2 shows on the weekend, so I'm just like destroying my body the whole weekend, and the whole all weekend I'm recovering. By the end of the weekend, I'm doing it again, and that was rough. That was bad. And around the time that I moved to Colorado was also around the time when I started, taking better care of my body, which probably translated into being able to learn Ableton at a quicker rate. So for sure, yeah, one time a month, and then other than that, it's for me as an upcoming artist and not having like a ton of opportunity. A lot of the opportunity that I feel like I have is opportunity that I've created for myself. So most of the time, if someone asks me if I want to play, usually the answer is yes, if I'm not already booked for something else.
So maybe the best advice to the world out there is like, if somebody wants you on stage, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to ask for sure, and always be available too. If you can set your life up in a way where you can make the time for art, then you'll have a lot more ability to say yes. Which is another tough thing, for a lot of folks. They've got like a 9 to 5, 40 hours a week kind of job, and with those, it's harder to pick up gigs or even just have the time to write music. So luckily for me, I've been selling residential solar, so as an independent contractor. So I have time to do what I love, and then work when I need to work, and kind of choose my own hours and all that stuff. So like I would definitely recommend to any artist to find a kind of job where they can choose their own hours, because essentially as an artist you're an independent contractor too. You work for yourself as a musician, whether you're making money or not.
Totally.
So to be able to do that in other realms of life is helpful for booking and being available for that.
So I think that one of the topics that maybe is less discussed in interviews, let's face it, the electronic music scene is synonymous with like the party scene, and there's a lot of criticism that drug use is prevalent, and I guess drug use being prevalent in the music and art scene in general. I've never thought of you as like this big advocate for drugs or a drug addict. Like, can you give us some insight there? Maybe, maybe some advice, or, the dark side of it and the bright side of it, sustainability.
Sure. I think it's definitely unfortunate that it's gotten that rap, although it does have some roots in a scene that had a lot of drugs. The rave scene in like the 80s and the 90s was fueled by Molly. Not completely, but I think a lot of people fell into that scene because they were young, they were partying. And I think to some degree, I've definitely seen a lot of people go down that route and take it too far. And you definitely can be sober and enjoy the music and dance with your friends. And I think we are seeing a little bit more of that kind of mentality now than we have before. A lot of people are quitting alcohol in particular. Mm-hmm. And since these kind of shows are often, it's a headliner at a bar, and the only reason why the bar is allowing this party in the first place is because they're going to make a bunch of money selling alcohol. So unfortunately, it's almost like you have to have some sort of drug, which I consider alcohol a drug for sure. So you have to have some sort of drug for people to want to come and that's been the culture for a long time. But I think that we're seeing some changes. That there's been sober raves, or a lot of times after parties are at venues where you can't sell alcohol because it's in the U.S. and you can't sell it after like 1 or 2, depending on where you are. So, which I actually just recently learned that you can't sell alcohol in Colorado after like 10 o'clock.
Oh my God.
It's awful. What? Yeah. I just went to like buy like a 6-pack on like a Friday night, and he was like, yeah, you know, can't sell it to you. It's illegal. Yeah, totally crazy. But I think, you know, the biggest thing to keep in mind is that you can be sober around people who are getting fucked up, and that's your personal choice. It doesn't have to be. It's easy to watch your friends, you know, do drugs or you know, drink or smoke weed or whatever it is, and want to be on their level or you know, have fun with them. But when at the end of the day, it's your body, it's your mind, and yeah, I just think it's just unnecessary to always do that. And you know, I do occasionally like to smoke weed
Sure.
and drink. You know, obviously I like to drink sometimes too, but more and more I've been cutting back, and I almost exclusively smoke or drink at a party that I'm playing or seeing a friend at, and that's like once a month. So it's kind of turned into a situation where it's moderated, but I moderate it a little bit less when I'm with friends. Mm-hmm. And I think that I wouldn't have been doing that if I hadn't had these phases where I was playing every single weekend, multiple times a week, and in that party scene all the time. So yeah, and it's for the best, because essentially I'm drinking and smoking less myself, and I'm more healthy, and I'm also not playing as much. So when people do see me on a flyer, it's like, oh, I haven't seen you play in like 6 months here. So people are more excited to be there, and I'm more excited to be there myself because I haven't been there for a long time.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a really healthy balance with the culture in general. Like, because
yeah.
I mean, I feel like the culture can really uplift people and kind of show them the light, if you will, but it could also just push people deep into the fucking darkness.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's scary. I mean, there's so many major festivals where people die. There was like 5 or 6 deaths at the last Okeechobee. And I think, you know, a lot of times people blame music promoters and people running or organizing the show. You know, there aren't like enough water receptacles or whatever, you know. But I think beyond that, a lot of it is just personal responsibility. And I think if you're going to a party and you don't know how to take care of yourself, that's a fucking problem. And I think we need more education on how to do these substances, how to drink responsibly, all that kind of stuff. Because ultimately, whether it's legal or not, people are going to do it. And that's kind of like a socio-political stance that I've taken with a lot of things. But it feels like it's better to educate than to punish, because you can kind of mitigate or alleviate a lot of the negative consequences of this kind of use for people who want to do it, if they know how to do it responsibly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like it's one of those things that's just not being talked about a lot. All right, I got another topic. Introverts. I think that a lot of people that are introverted look at the party scene, and maybe huge, like people that are really passionate about electronic music, but the concept of going out to one of these parties or to a rave, you know, is just like, oh my God, like just social anxiety explosion.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any insight on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, as far as like having anxiety and being an introvert myself, going to the shows, it's a lot easier to do that if I allow myself to drink.
Sure.
And that's part of the reason why I still allow myself to do it a little bit. But it's really easy to go overboard on that. And I think a lot of introverts do that. They substitute their fears with substance abuse, whatever their poison of choice is. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for introverts to get out of their shell. And even though they might not like to be around people all the time. There isn't an introvert that I've ever met that doesn't enjoy friendship and interconnection, and you find a lot of that in the rave scene. So I think especially introverts that enjoy the music, those are the people that should be going out there. I'm sick of like playing a set and having some drunk guy try to rap in my ear. Like I'd rather have a bunch of introverts who aren't saying anything, that are just dancing to the music, because that's what I'm doing. I'm not. I mean, like one of my pet peeves is like DJs who talk on the mic all the time.
Same.
Like I'm not anti-mic. I think using the mic to say hey, this is who I am, or like there's a dubstep artist that I really enjoy who's on Wakan's label, Taboo, and he throughout the whole set he's making jokes, and he's like a stand-up comedian dubstep artist basically. So I think
that's funny. I've never heard.
Oh,
of
it's
this
great.
before.
Yeah, you should check it out. Yeah, he actually has a podcast too. It's called Talks with Taboo. But so he's a great example of how to do the mic and not be annoying. But I'm an introvert as well, so I'm not trying to talk to people while I'm playing music. So I think that the kind of people who would enjoy the music that I'm playing, who might relate to me in that way, I think that, go to the show. The worst thing that happens is, something awkward happens, and it's like something that I've been trying to remind myself of as someone who I was actually diagnosed with general anxiety disorder like a couple months ago. So I definitely know what it's like to be afraid of like being around a bunch of people. But ultimately, you just can't take things personally. Like if something weird happens or someone says something weird and you're like worrying about it a lot, like it probably has nothing to do with you. So that's something that's helped me as well with being in these situations or environments.
Totally. Yeah. I love the way you worded that. It makes a lot of sense, And it's like, because I've heard of a lot of, I've invited a zillion people over the years to parties, and I've had people literally tell me, like, no, I'm an introvert. Like, I'm not into partying. And I'm like, well, I think that everybody can go to this party, but I think the way you just explained it makes a lot of sense. It's like these parties, like there is a big focus on music, and let's face it, like if you're introverted and you don't really want to be chatting a bunch with strangers, let's say, there's already something there to do.
Yeah,
you don't.
Yeah, you don't have to talk to anyone while you're there. When the main focus is the music, for sure.
So one of the things that I feel like our culture is known for on the inside, but maybe not as much on the outside, is like inclusivity. I think from the outside it might look like, oh my God, like, this is a certain type of people specifically that listen to this kind of music, or, it's like, oh, those people are so cool or something. It's like on a pedestal. What's your experience with inclusivity in these parties and festivals and raves?
So I think there's definitely an element of clickiness in certain scenes. If you have a group of musicians who really enjoy themselves as a group in their own small community or friendship, looking at that from an outside perspective, it could seem like, oh, like I couldn't be a part of that, and I feel excluded. So that definitely happens a lot. There's a lot of artist collectives all over the country that, if you just message them and said, hey, can I be one of your resident DJs or something, or even like a bar that has resident DJs, there's some exclusive elements to that as well. But I think, when you're actually at the party and you're mingling potentially, or you meet someone who's a part of a record label, or they're the person at the bar who books the DJs, having a normal conversation with those people and then bringing up the fact that you want to be their photographer or their DJ or whatever, like that kind of networking where you're just meeting people for the fact that you want to meet people and then going from there, doesn't feel as exclusive as when you're seeing it maybe on like social media or something, where you just see a bunch of people doing really awesome things and you don't see like the rest of their lives, you know.
The projected image of culture.
And I think that adds to the feeling that some people might get of feeling excluded. But as far as like being at these parties, I think for the most part, that's been like a key ingredient to why the EDM like community in general has been thriving for so long, ever since the like dawn of raves, is this idea of like plur and inclusivity. So I feel like in my experience that's been pretty relevant and like still a major part of the scene.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should start wrapping it up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been awesome talking to you, getting to know like the behind the scenes a little bit more, the in-depth perspective. Really appreciate you sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, it's been really fun. This is the first interview I've ever done. You know, hopefully it's not the last.
Heck yeah.
And I'm excited to see the next people you might have on. And yeah, I'm just super grateful for being here and appreciate your time.
Well, cheers. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're watching this, you know, check out my music. It's on Spotify, SoundCloud, all the streaming platforms, SHBASS music.
I'll do that too. So, you know, thanks for watching. And like we said earlier, you can support SHBASS by, you know, clicking that like, subscribe button, you know, supporting with merch, going to the shows, you know. All right, bonus feature. We're going to do a little unboxing video of this vintage Atomic Warhead. It doesn't say Atomic, but it's an Atomic. It says Extreme Sour. Have you ever had one of these?
You know, I think I might have had one when I was like 12. Black cherry. I'm gonna be honest, that's not my favorite flavor.
Oh man, even better. We're I mean, that's what we should have with reaction videos. Now look at all the sour flavor on the outside of it.
Oh man. All right. Here goes nothing.
Oh my gosh. All right, first experiences.
Yeah, it's kind of like a weird grainy texture on the outside.
That's the sour.
Oh, that's the sour
patina.
part.
The Warhead has a sour patina.
But right after that, like it's gone. The sour's gone. Sweet. Does it get more sour later?
I haven't had one in 15 years. I think there's like a fizzy center that's pretty sour that
Okay.
might kick in later.
That's the Warhead part.
That's the Warhead. We might need to cut to that because it could take a while unless you're like a candy cruncher.
Yeah, I mean now it just tastes like a cough, like a, you know, Whorehound cough drops. Oh, they're like aged in copper or something, like copper receptacles.
Aged candies.
I don't know. Or maybe it's like the liquid,
It's
like before
the scotch of candy.
before they harden the candy, it's like it sits in like a copper thing. It tastes like just like it though, but cherry flavored. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Also want to give a special thanks to Dylan Albans for shooting this and handling the audio. And another special thanks to MCAT for providing the gear and Dylan's time as well.